Welcome to part 2 of trying to fix up my old Subaru Loyale. If you didn't see last week's video where I tackled the climate controls, and go watch that first and then come back, but we're gonna hop right into figuring out why there's a squeak up in the front right and there's a little bit of a clunk slash rattle in the rear right. That has gotta be one of my least favorite jobs that I have to do every winter. We got here tonight for drinking in the shop at Kettle House Brewing Co. Snowblind White Stout. This thing's actually really good. It's kind of like stout vibes, but not near as like heavy and dense feeling as a stout. All right, that out of the way, now let's get to work. This has got to be one of the best tools I bought. I grew up working on cars with my dad, and he didn't have an impact. I spent so long trying to get bolts loose without an impact when just, you know, dugga. So my main theory on this is that it's the half shaft that's right here. That's the part that brings the power from the engine to the wheel, and it has two joints in it that allow the suspension to, you know, go up and down. And there's a story there, actually. I spent probably about a week of my life trying to just get a half shaft that worked. If you have one of these cars, do not get a half shaft, at least from Advance Auto. And from what I understand, the rest of them aren't much better, but I had to go to a junkyard and get this one and reboot it and re-grease it. And so that's my initial thought, is that I messed up. But looking at this, the boots look fine, and honestly the sound I'm hearing doesn't really make sense with them. It sounds a lot more like brakes. It's more like a squeak, 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 squeak versus a constant like whistling or something, which is something I have heard from the boots before when I did install them incorrectly the first time. So I'm thinking what we've got here is actually more likely a stuck caliper or some of the metal pieces squeaking. Let me start this thing up and drive it a little bit and see if we can replicate the noise. This car is four-wheel drive, and usually when you think of four-wheel drive, you think of rear-wheel drive based in like trucks and stuff, but this thing is actually front-wheel drive, and the little four-wheel drive push button you see in the cab connects the center diff to the rear wheels. But yeah, let's go see if we can reproduce this. Well, I didn't hear any squeaking. I want to see if our pads look at all low here. And no, these pads, they have a lot of meat left on them. I am seeing a lot of suggestions for it being wheel bearings, which I hadn't thought of yet, but it very well could be, especially in the rear where I'm hearing kind of a clunking noise. That would make a lot of sense. That is something I could try to do here, but I've tried to do wheel bearings myself, and I'd just rather take them to a shop and have them use their hydraulic presses to press them in. Using those home presses is just not a good time, I've experienced. And you know, the wheel bearings would actually make some sense for this one as well, because this is the one I hear squeaking. The one in the back I kind of hear clonking, and especially the squeaking would make sense because it was rhythmic with the speed of the wheel. And also, I guess I wasn't hearing it when there wasn't any vertical load on the wheel, like when I tested it just now here in the shop. I would think that wheel bearings would make more noise under actual weight. And also, when I'm wiggling this, I can tell by this movement that you're seeing right now that the lower ball joint, I believe, is bad. Maybe that's a little more money I'm gonna have to spend on this thing. It's a lot harder than last week's essentially free fix. Let's go jack up the rear and see if we can figure out anything more definitive about that. So I'm not sure if you can hear this, but I am hearing a little bit of a scraping noise, but that's not the knocking that I thought I might hear. So is that coming from the diff or the wheel hub? Okay, so that noise is definitely coming from the brakes, but I really do not know if that's like any sort of knocking noise that I thought I was hearing. And there really isn't any playback here. You know, I do wonder if this brake could be our squeaking noise, because I'm hearing that rubbing from it. Since we have all four wheels up off the ground, we can just start this thing up and put it in four-wheel drive and see if it squeaks. It's a little nerve-wracking just because if it falls off the stands, but as you saw earlier, this thing isn't going anywhere. I need some wood to knock on. The only thing I'm hearing is a rattling. Let's go check that out. Ooh. I do not want to get these things caught in the wheel. This half shaft right here is looking quite wobbly. I wonder if my initial theory has any merit. Wow, it really wants to spin this wheel instead of the one on the left. If you know how an open diff works, then you know what I just did. An open diff sends power to the wheel with the least traction, and considering I put traction on this via my shoe, the other wheel started spinning. I almost wonder maybe the caliper on the passenger side is messed up. I don't even know. But that shaking of that drive shaft does not seem normal. I really am not sure what's going on here. I did hear that weird noise coming from up here, and there's also that brake noise coming from back there. It could be possible that it's finally time for me to learn how to do drum brakes, which is something I've never done before. And it could just be a wheel bearing or maybe even that ball joint up here. Man, I am really not sure what to do here except for, you know, throwing parts at it. Like, I know that a few things are bad and I could replace them, but I really don't want to replace them if I don't know that it's going to solve my root issue. Well, I am stumped. I think I'm going to put the wheels back on this thing, drop it down, and drive it to work tomorrow and see if the issues still persist. If they haven't gone away, I honestly might have to drop this thing off at a shop and have it professionally diagnosed. I like doing suspension work. All of this stuff here, it all makes sense to me. I've done a lot with suspension, as you saw with the Volvo, but diagnostics is always, of course, just so hard. So yeah, let's get the wheels tossed on this thing and I'll get back to you tomorrow. It's getting kind of late tonight. All right, I'm gonna head inside. I'll let you know how it sounds when I drive it to work tomorrow. I drove this thing to work today, but then I actually turned around and just came back home and took something else because I wanted it to be cool for what we're actually gonna do today. I actually didn't notice the noises, like there was no squeak coming from the front and maybe there was a hint of that clunk in the rear. And so I wanted it to be cool so we could flush the heater core and see if that helps with the heating. While I didn't notice the squeak, I did notice a little bit of that. You first turn on the heat and it's kind of warm and then it cools down, which can be an indicator of a clogged heater core. So I really do want to know if I need to replace the heater core before I pull the engine. But we're gonna flush it today and see if that helps at all. So one of the methods I've seen for this is actually using a garden hose to flush these out, and these are the two pipes right here. All of my hoses are shut off for the winter, so we aren't gonna be doing that. We're gonna be doing the other method, which is just to swap around these two hoses so the inlet goes to the outlet and vice versa, and then run the car for a little bit and see if that flushes anything back through it. Should be as easy as two hose clamps. Why didn't I put down a drain bucket? Now what do? Well, that one's stable, so I guess I leave my thumb or my finger over this one. Alright, those are swapped now, and there is a lot of coolant on the floor. Alright, now I'm gonna hook up my bleeding little funnel thing and run the car for a little bit and see if it flushes anything backwards. You know, it might just be confirmation bias, but it sure felt like the heat was warmer already, so I guess I'll swap these back and we'll see if that's the case. Though it's gonna be a lot harder considering the car's now hot. Well, there's nothing else to do but do it. We're just gonna lose a bunch of coolant, but we gotta do it. Oh my god. Yeah, I can't plug that, I just burned myself. Oh, it can't be good to breathe. Yeah, it's pretty much drained. Well, I guess maybe we're doing a partial coolant flush while we do this. Worse things have happened. Alright, let's put more coolant in here and get the car running and get her bled. That heat is warmer than I've ever felt. So I think that was definitely something that this car needed. I'm gonna let it run for a little longer, make sure it gets completely bled here. On second thought, I'm not actually sure how much that helped with the heat inside. I do know that it didn't hurt, and it does kind of feel warmer, but I'm just not sure. I'll have to drive it over the next week for a little bit and just see how it does overall with the heat. Well, that's actually it for this video. If you thought last week's video was a short one, then, I mean, look at this week's. I've been actually having a social life recently, so I haven't had as much time to be doing stuff out here. Well, if you like seeing me work on this thing, hit the like button and go check out last week's video if you haven't seen it. Yeah, I'll see you next week. I have a big mess to clean up. See you later.